All right, what is going on, everyone at home watching the midweek mid-range? It is Parker Ainsworth, as always, here for another Wednesday night show on basketball. We're a little bit later tonight with a little bit funkier show. Couple things. One, people may be popping in and out throughout the night. Tonight was an open invite to a handful of people to come on and talk hoops whenever, wherever, whatever they're watching, wherever they're watching. So we'll see who all shows up at some point or another. As for me, we are starting a little bit later than normal on a Wednesday, if I'm being completely honest, because I've been back and forth, like I'm sure many of you all have been, with NBA League Pass. Yes, NBA League Pass has been a pain in my side tonight. I'm not going to tell you how I'm currently watching basketball games, but I can tell you right now it ended up not being on NBA League Pass, which means I turned on this Rockets-Timberwolves game just in time to see my Rockets down 20 to another young basketball team in the late third quarter. I have been keeping up with the game a little bit. I got to say, I liked seeing Jalen Green's first nice putback dunk by Alperen Sengun there. I did enjoy seeing some of the aggression out of our young guys, our being the Houston Rockets young guys. I'm not sure I like the defensive numbers. We're clearly having trouble cutting off Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards. As I watch this game, while I've been trying to get this set up for a minute now, I have to say, I think some of this is growing pains, and that's kind of one of my two things to watch for the Houston Rockets as I look at them is what kind of a team are they come January, February, March, April, as opposed to October, November, December. I anticipate them growing a lot. Got 4 teenagers on the roster, a handful of guys under 23 as well. As I wrote in this week's Rockets Roundup, it's worth pointing out that the University of Houston has 5 guys 22 or older, and the Houston Rockets have 5 guys 23 or younger, right? That's really not a big difference considering that's a college-level basketball team. And so I think they've got a lot of promise, but they're not going to be very strong to start the season. It also hurts when you look at the roster spots, and they're spending one whole spot and $40 million of cap space on coach John Wall, which in a lot of ways is not maybe the most economical use of money. But I think it actually is going to work out best for both he and the team in the long run. I've written extensively about how I think that'll play out for Wall and the Rockets. I think Wall is a unique mentor for the young backcourt in Houston. He's got an interesting relationship with Kevin Porter Jr. in that they shared the backcourt last year, but they can both relate to relatively rough upbringings. They can both relate to being a star at a young age and being scorers that are point guards. And I think that's an interesting guy that can get in Kevin Porter Jr.'s ear. And I think that's an important aspect of his role on the staff/team. I also think it's worth pointing out his role in being a mentor for Jalen Green is important in Jalen Green's development, because Jalen Green is one of the few guys that can relate to that John Wall explosive speed we all saw in early parts of Wall's career. John Wall was a stud his entire life. Jalen Green has been a top-ranked prospect his entire life. Those are two very relatable levels that not a whole lot of guys can talk to Jalen Green about, and not a lot of guys can talk to John Wall about, right? And so I think that is an interesting... I hate charges. I think that's... Sorry, we just had a charge on Dayton Waba. I think that's an interesting level where you can have the two go back and forth. I also think it's worth pointing out that for all of the players, Wall is a multi-time All-Star that comes from the highest of highs and lowest of lows as an individual basketball player, and that his role ought to be worth mentioning. The other thing I'll say, I've talked a lot about growth of the Houston Rockets. The other thing I'll say that I'm looking forward to seeing out of my Houston Rockets is how they play on defense this year. Obviously, they were an atrocious defense a year ago with the constant lineup changes, constant roster changes, and so on. Tonight's not been a great showing as they've given up almost 100 points, and we're not quite to the end of the third quarter. But I will say that I anticipate a healthier, more consistent roster playing a little bit better defense. And what does that look like once they've played in certain coverages together, once they've played, 1-4 high pick and roll type sets, whatever the situation may be, once they've done that together and they know where the rotations are, know where the help is, know how long their teammates are coming off of corners and those kinds of things. I don't mean to say that Houston has a bunch of great defenders, because bluntly looking at the roster with all those young guys are never great defenders, so they don't. I will say I think Eric Gordon and John Wall and their veteran roles. Because again, even though Wall's not playing, he is a leader on this team. I think that they will be good in the film rooms. So like tonight, after this game's over, they'll go home. Kevin Porter Jr. comes in the next day. Eric Gordon is a tenacious defender that has clearly studied his craft and can work with Porter Jr., right? John Wall is a tenacious defender that can get in Jalen Green's ear about, hey, you can make that play. You and I are explosive enough. You can make that play, right? And so that's my Houston Rockets spiel as I'm looking at their two, the big two I have for them. I got to be honest, as I'm looking across the league, there are certainly teams with more interesting big two things. This midweek mid-range, we do things in pairs if you hadn't noticed. And if I'm looking at two things for a number of other teams, I'm going to stick with Minnesota Timberwolves right now because they're playing the Houston Rockets, frankly, scoring at a pretty efficient clip against the Houston Rockets. My thoughts for them would be, first, is Karl Anthony Towns back to enjoying basketball? He had as awful a 2020 as anyone in America, right? And so is he the kind of guy that will get back to that like love of the game, that childish love of the game that at some point inside all of these pro basketball players is somewhere deep down inside of there? The second thing I would look for in the Minnesota Timberwolves is, where is their cohesion? Are they back to being a unit? They brought in D'Angelo Russell to play with Karl Anthony Towns and do this thing together and so on. And it's kind of getting to the point where if they can't start winning some games with those two, they got to break it all up again, because they hadn't won a lot of games with those two since, or with Karl Anthony Towns, I should say, since Jimmy Butler left town, right? And so it's kind of getting to gut-punching time on that experiment in Minnesota. Perhaps new ownership, right? The A-Rod group, perhaps they want to see it out a little bit longer, but just frankly, we've seen it for a long time. Karl Anthony Towns is not a fully developed player, but how much growth do you see after the player's third and fourth year as far as changing roles go, right? That's not necessarily where this goes. Ooh, big steal. Kevin Porter Jr. Oh. Kevin Porter Jr. got from behind Beasley. Oh, well. All right. So, but I think that the Minnesota Timberwolves are kind of at stare yourself in the mirror, and is this going to work time? Tonight, they're beating my Houston Rockets pretty badly, so it probably feels like that. On the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure if I necessarily would agree to that, but that's where they're at tonight. The national game is a much closer game, and so you're probably more likely to be watching Knicks Celtics, a little New York Boston rivalry for the folks at home that like East Coast basketball. Excuse me. And so what I will say is that I think it's interesting in watching that Knicks Celtics air quotes rivalry. Both teams are going to kind of be fighting to get out of the bottom half of the playoff picture this season. Maybe the Knicks kind of, because we didn't necessarily expect them a couple years back when they're building this team to be in this place. And the Celtics kind of is interesting. They're interesting because a couple years back, they were ahead of this place. And like, man, they're going to be winning championships in 2021. And they've kind of fallen back down the same second half of the playoff bracket. And so both teams land here in a really interesting way. You got to think at some point, Jalen Green and Jason Tatum figure it out and get over that hump. But the truth is they've taken a step backwards. Their hump was the Eastern Conference Finals, and now it's getting out of the first round. And that's a weird spot to be in for a franchise. They are starting over in the front office. They moved Brad Stevens up, and they moved Ike Ogu into the head coach spot. And I don't know what to make of them outside of watching them, play a close game with New York. New York's up by 10 as we're talking right now. And New York, frankly, it feels like this is weirdly like continuation, if this were to carry on, of the same ahead of schedule New York team from a year ago, where they're not like actually actually NBA title contending good, but they are weirdly better than like fighting for more picks and using all of their dollars on waiting on the next free agent. Like they need to kind of make some moves in the near future. Do they get into the Ben Simmons contest, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point over the course of the night? Do they get in on Kyrie Irving? Do they get in on anyone else? That all remains to be seen. But I would expect the Knicks and the Celtics to both kind of make some move to get out of this lull that they're in, because quite frankly, I think it's surprising a lot of people. For whatever reason, I don't think bluntly, if I had told you 4 years ago that 4 years from then, the Knicks and Celtics would both kind of be around the 5th or 6th seed, the Knicks probably be excited and the Celtics would probably be disappointed. And that's a weird thing to see out of this old rivalry. Wizards Raptors, the next game down the docket. Interesting because as someone who studies the Houston Rockets a little bit, I got to see both those teams in the preseason. Would not have guessed that the Wizards are going to jump out on top of the Raptors like that. Looks like they're going to hold on to that thing and win. There's about 2.5 minutes left to go in the game. Wizards are up by 10. And bluntly, that has to be Bradley Beal effect, right? I was sitting here watching it, the box score this is great radio. As I pull it up, the box score's got Bradley Beal at 23, Kyle Kuzma at 11, Spencer Dinwiddie at 13. Montrezl Harrell brings a lot to that team. He's got a 20-10 double-double. But I got to be honest, I feel like this is a lot more about the Raptors are closer to the pre-Kawhi Leonard Raptors, if not much farther behind, right, without DeMar DeRozan and without Kyle Lowry and so on, than they are to the 2019 or 2020 even Toronto Raptors. As we keep going down the list of teams in the NBA right now, Cavs, Grizzlies, and Ja Morant doing Ja Morant things. What I got to say here that I think is worth noting is, however you watch basketball, I say as I have a screen in the bottom corner of my screen that is not NBA League Pass, but is clearly streaming from NBA League Pass. However you watch basketball, you need to watch a lot of Ja Morant this year. He got up and pinned Lauri Markkanen off the glass earlier in this game. The highlight already has gone viral. And what I really have to say here is that Ja Morant has made the leap between year 1 and 2. He made the leap between year 1 and 2. He will make the leap again between year 2 and 3. You're going to want to watch this guy play basketball, even if it's on a lot of League Pass games, because Memphis is what Memphis is right now. Ja Morant is exciting. He's exhilarating. He's truly, truly, truly like in the same mold as young Rose, young Westbrook, those kind of guys. Obviously, Rose is winning an MVP at age 21. I don't know if we're going to quite be there with Ja Morant this year, but I do think it's worth pointing out that he is the same kind of explosive, once-in-a-lifetime, generational athlete, the kind of guy that you'll be like, even if he doesn't win championships and MVPs, telling your kid about, man, but he could fly. 20 years from now, you're telling your kids, I got to watch Ja Morant fly around on television in a way other people can't do. The thing I think that sticks out most about him, too, is his swagger. I'm pulling that one up right now. His swagger as he's doing it, he very much has the small school, mid-major, I was the number 2 pick, should have been the number 1 pick kind of guy with all that chip on his shoulder. God, the Minnesota Timberwolves they just don't miss threes, I guess. Anthony Edwards doesn't miss threes anymore. And so I got to say that chip on Ja Morant's shoulder, for going back Ja Morant, is so big that it makes this little point guard flying around through the air, punishing the rim, punishing defenders, relentless, doesn't care who's under the basket kind of guy. It just makes it more fun because then when he hits the ground, he stands up tall, flexes everything out, and lets you know what he just did. It's a whole different kind of fun than watching big men dunk down low and that kind of stuff. I highly recommend finding as many Ja Morant games as possible. All right, as I'm scrolling through here, the Grizzlies, Cavs rebuilding project. Watch Garland, watch Sexton. They're fun, but don't get your hopes too high. Just watch that for what it is. Have a good time. 2 small guard sets are going to be constantly intriguing to me. As I watch 2 small guard sets, I'm going to always go back to, but if they couldn't get it to work with the 2 guys in Portland, how is this going to be different, right? How are Darius Garland and Colin Sexton going to be different and better than Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum? Because it feels like that one's about to fall apart too, and we will get to the Blazers, I'm sure, at some point as we go down the list here. But if McCollum and Lillard doesn't work in the long term for a title contending team, something else needs to get added to Cleveland, or they're going to end up sloughing off those pieces like they've done so many pieces over the course of the years, right? Speaking of pieces, Kevin Porter Jr. with 3. There we go. We're only down 26 so far. I hope this isn't the whole Rocket season. I will say I've predicted speed bumps, predicted hiccups. There's a lot of excitement around Houston. We're not going back to a 45-50 win team anytime soon. But I think there are glimpses here, like watching Kevin Porter Jr. be more aggressive as a creator is much more fun. Amidst my various rambling, it's worth pointing out the Philadelphia 76ers are playing the New Orleans Pelicans, and frankly, they're going to be the Sixers, that is, are going to be the story of the NBA for the foreseeable future. All of the talk about Ben Simmons in the last 72 hours, I was going to say pales in comparison, but really just continues to be on track and on brand with the Ben Simmons stories, basically since they were eliminated by the Atlanta Hawks last summer. I go back and forth on this one, and I don't know. I don't know how to necessarily explain it to a layperson or there's a better phrase than layperson or commoner. That's probably not what we're supposed to say anymore. But Ben Simmons, initially, I watched those games. I'm like, he has to play better. He has to be some sort of a scoring threat. I'm not saying he has to be a 90% shooter. I'm saying he has to be a 35% shooter. Big dunk by Christian Wood just now. I am saying, however, that at some point in time, you've got to turn on the jets and score a basket for the sake of your own teammates, right? To get around with the rest of your teammates, you got to go through the motions of trying to get a basket to make yourself a respectable offensive player and respectably defended. That was nice stuff by Christian Wood. They keep showing it over and over again. Ben Simmons never did that as far back to the make himself respected by defenses as a scorer. He does everything else very well, and he's a big part of the reason they're as good as they were. He's also a big reason the ceiling is where it is on Philadelphia. But as bad as he played in the Atlanta series, everything from the Atlanta series up until about 48 hours ago, as the moment this is being recorded, went poorly on Philadelphia's behalf, right? Everything Philadelphia did was both vindictive, petty, childish. I mean, we make fun of coaches for coach speak, but you do coach speak in a press conference after the series is over, so you don't have Doc Rivers knocking his guy and slashing, A, the trade value, and B, the confidence of his own starting point forward like that in front of the country, in front of the world, on national media following the loss. He didn't know if he can win a championship with him on the team. That isn't good. That's bad on Doc, right? Joel Embiid, unable to even fake an answer about whether or not he wants to be back playing with Ben Simmons, is bad on Joel Embiid, not Ben Simmons, right? No player coming to his defense after that is bad on the players on the 76ers, not on Ben Simmons. And so, of course, he didn't want to show up to training camp. And of course, he was late. And of course, he didn't want to be involved. And frankly, I'd also argue, of course, he doesn't want to do some silly defensive slide, get from your coverage spot to your better spot drill on Monday's practice. I think that probably happens with star players fairly frequently. I don't think you had Shaquille O'Neal doing a lot of different defensive rotations on coverage, right? I don't think you had Shaquille O'Neal doing a bunch of mundane defensive drills in October of 2000 and 2001 and 2003 when he's leading the LA Lakers. What I do think you had is a guy that had leverage and a guy that everyone knew was going to show up and work on game nights. And Ben Simmons is not that. So he didn't have the leverage, and I get it. But he is an elite player. And so I get why he thinks that should have been probably not that big a deal. And then Philadelphia tosses him out of practice and suspends him a game. And it's like, this just won't end. And I think that it was Ben Simmons' blame. You had the series end. Sixers blame. You had shows at training camp won't participate in practice, sharing blame. And now I think we're back to blaming Sixers because of stuff the guys like Joel Embiid and those guys have said after he would not show up to participate. And so with that said, I don't know. It's something to watch. It's one of the two big things to watch for the Sixers for sure. But I just don't feel confident or comfortable putting all the blame on either Ben or the Sixers for either point, because I see how that yo-yo has gone back and forth. And I truly feel bad for Ben. It's a bad situation. It's a bad spot to be in. But I also understand the Sixers being like, dude, we're paying you a lot of money to be here in practice. And that's a back and forth interesting thing. I don't know. I think the fascinating part of this is they're going to suspend him and he won't play and da-da-da-da. But the truth is, for them to trade him, he has to play, right? He has to play. He has to show up to practice. He has to play in the games and play well. Because right now, no one wants to trade for him. Like, no one wants to trade for the guy that turned down a dunk. They want to trade for the Defensive Player of the Year candidate. They want to trade for the guy that can create the most three-pointers in the NBA. They want to trade for, God, the Houston Rockets are so young. They don't want to trade for people trading for Ben Simmons. They don't want to trade for the guy that Ben Simmons has been or what Philadelphia has turned him into. They want to trade for the Ben Simmons of the past. And we don't get to see or verify that he's Ben Simmons of the past without playing. So it feels like it doesn't end until some other superstar, if some other superstar were to win out. Ooh, that may come up later in the day as we're going through the different teams in the NBA. Heads up, that's a West Coast team. It's a night game. Game hasn't started yet. As far as New Orleans goes, I'm looking for growth out of Zion Williamson and Point Zion that I haven't seen yet. I will say we've had a lot of interesting years out of New Orleans now, and they change coaches and they change stars and they change whatever and da-da-da. And it's like at some point, ownership's got to look more at management and see what's going on there, because you keep rolling these dice out and keep getting more or less the same result. You got Brandon Ingram, you got Zion Williamson. Those guys have both been in all-star games, and your team sucks. And I don't mean to say that they can't be good. They just seem to always find some way to let it fall apart. Point Zion is an interesting look this year. What I want to look to see more in the tape there, and again, I'm watching Rockets and Timberwolves right now, so the tape is what the tape is, but I'll check the tape and see what's more about what's going on, because in watching New Orleans, how does New Orleans finagle and play Point Zion with no Lonzo? Are they going to really slide over Devontae Graham and think that fixes things? Or what happens for New Orleans? It looks like they started Josh Hart, but then he played 10 minutes. I wouldn't have guessed 10 minutes, but I would have guessed low. I think Devontae Graham's just a better fit in the backcourt spot. I also wonder if they end up playing the Trey Murphy kid, the rookie they got out of Virginia, I believe. Is Trey Murphy a Virginia guy? Yeah, Virginia. Anyway, big-time shooter, high-ranked shooter coming in the draft. That's why I was following along, was he was a high-ranked shooter coming in the draft. And one of the highest-ranked shooters coming in the draft. And I'm anxious to see how that goes for him. As we're going through this, I'm so disappointed in the Rockets. They're playing fine, I guess. I thought maybe we could keep this team under 130. They're at 111 with 8 minutes to go. This is a rough evening. Magic Spurs storylines there are not super exhilarating. I would recommend watching the Rockets or the Timberwolves over the Magic and the Spurs. So I don't feel too bad about that. Two things to watch in Oklahoma City. Obviously, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is always a good watch, but I also think Josh Giddey and the way that he plays off of Shai, making their possessions that Josh Giddey will be able to dominate the ball and let Shai Gilgeous-Alexander work away and off of him as an off-ball guy that are interesting, to say the least. And so I would pay attention to what they've got Josh Giddey doing. Feels like Oklahoma City is a glorified NBA farm team. So always, if you're a fan of some other team, watch Oklahoma City, because you never know where you're going to get those guys. We're going point Josh Christopher in Houston. Oh. KJ Martin with effort. KJ Martin's a hustler. So that's right. That pause of sorts, me watching KJ Martin muscle for a couple of things. We're joined here now. Oh. And the silence, my talking to radio silence is done now. Ryan is joining us. Ryan, I've talked about a handful of teams, but I had a little bit of talk tonight about basketball. Talk about something else, though, because I'm sitting here watching my Houston Rockets lose. But
I know. I looked at the score right before I hopped on. I was like, I'm just not going to mention that, because when I looked before I worked out, it was, a normal, just losing the game, and now it's I think it's like 30. So we won't mention that at all.
I've done plenty of mentioning it in between things as I've been watching. Ryan, the theme of the show is long twos, and we're talking about pairs of things you're watching for this season. There's two big storylines out there in the NBA right now, and two big players and big names not playing right now. What are your two big stories or things to watch for as we head into the NBA season?
So I will just stay away from those two people that we'll just not name at the present moment. I'm going to go with one player that I'm looking at, and that's Donovan Mitchell, because, the Jazz the last couple of years have been trying to get over the hump into the Western Conference Finals, be kind of treated as a true contender. I think even everybody last year, for the most part, was looking at them a little side-eye, like, okay, you're the 1 seed, but the Clippers aren't trying too hard. The Lakers are injured. The Nuggets are injured. And I think for them to get to that level that they want to get to, Donovan Mitchell has to take over and be the undisputed best player on their team. It can't be led by Rudy Gobert, no matter how good he is on defense. They need Mitchell's, not only his scoring, which obviously in the playoffs has been pretty good, both efficiency and just put in the raw numbers, especially the last 2 years, but just that overall playmaking and just do it all, kind of combo guard is what he is. He's not quite a wing, not quite a point guard. So, what does that next step for him look like? Everyone gives him the Dwayne Wade kind of archetype, is hoping that this is what he would become, which obviously if he becomes Dwayne Wade, right, odds are there. I mean, he'll make an NBA finals at the very least, in his career. So kind of seeing, he's going on year 5 in the league now, right?
Yes.
5.
He's a rookie of the year. Ben Simmons was rookie of the year, but not a rookie, right?
Yeah, exactly. What does rookie actually mean? We still don't know. But so this is kind of the time where those guys, who become the superstars, MVP candidates and stuff, really make that leap from being really good to now being able to carry a team night in and night out in a way that's championship caliber.
So talk to me, are you thinking like in a consistency model, or are you thinking in like when you say leading the team? Because he has typically been the high point scorer. He's typically been the guy who gets the shot at the end of the game for whatever that's worth. What's the switch he's got to flip?
It's a combination, and some of it's not even going to be, most of it's not going to be stat wise. Like, bumping up to like 24 or 28 a game, 28 to 30, but what are we talking about, Parker? One shot and a free throw, or, right. It's very, very negligible. I do think it is playmaking, which we've seen with Conley come in and being kind of more that true point guard. It's allowed Donovan to focus a little bit more on scoring. But what do all the best guards, wings do? They do both. They do both. They are the lead playmaker and the lead scorer. And so I think for me, it's just in those subtleties. Again, it's not, maybe he gets one more assist a game, but it's just overall helping make his teammates better. I know, like on TNT, Shaq and Charles and Kenny are always talking about that, especially Shaq and Charles being former superstars. Yeah. Kenny not quite the same. He was a role player. And, as much as, people I would say maybe like us want to give him a little shit, if I can say that on here.
Go for it.
Yeah. Oh, you guys are just like being meatheads and like just do more. But the best players do make their teammates better, whether it be stat wise, whether it be, opening up their game, whether it be, maybe it's sacrificing a little bit early to make sure I get these other guys involved as I'm just kind of reading out the whole defense. And that's how they get there. And then I do think too, and the Jazz in the postseason, I really think this is an issue for them. They don't have a wing defender that you're throwing on the table as an all defensive guy. Royce O'Neal does his best, but he's not a wing stopper. And I don't even think Donovan can get to that level. Because when we talk about the Dwayne Wade archetype, like everyone talks about offense, but him being the best shot blocking guard ever, and really, not maybe possession to possession being a terror on defense, but being able to lock people down when he gets when he needs to. That's another place where I think Donovan needs to step up and lead his team. What true leaders do, unless he's going to be, I guess, like Steph Curry and just score so many points on such high efficiency that he doesn't need to be quite as good.
To be fair, if Donovan Mitchell were to turn into an efficient guy like Steph Curry, the Jazz are really, really good all of a sudden. I will say they're up 10 or 12 points, and it does feel like something shy of that next step. I don't know how to quantify it either, though, Ryan. And that's one of your two things. I want to also introduce Ladarius Brown showed up. Ladarius, we're going through. Ryan just showed up a minute ago. Ladarius, Ryan, Ladarius. Talking about like pairs of things, like, again, midweek, mid-range. We're doing things in twos. A couple of things we're looking for as we're looking at the league as a whole. Ryan just gave his, being he wants to see Donovan Mitchell take the next step. That's one of his two. Do you have something, Ladarius, you're looking at?
I mean, that's a very good one with Donovan Mitchell. I think for me to say, am I saying he's a superstar now? I don't think he's quite there. But I didn't know what Ryan had said. But what I will say is that if he does take that next step, Utah's not a terrible team. Donovan Mitchell takes that next step. I mean, I don't want to say sky's the limit type situation, but there are a couple of things that I feel Donovan can do to take that next step. I don't want to, pull like a scroll and list them, but like hear ye. But one of my things that I'm looking for is, and it kind of happened opening night, is I was curious to see how the Lakers were going to come out opening night. And I'm not going to say it was as expected, because what to understand is that it's continuity. Like, you can have LeBron, AD, Russ, all of these guys. But at the end of the day, we have to understand it's a similar situation to with Miami where they had LeBron, D-Wade, and Bosh. When you have guys who were superstars on other teams, and you're essentially trying to bring them all together. Great talent, but ultimately the problem is, let's just say fourth quarter, who takes the last shot type situation. And to me, and I think I might have talked about it here or another podcast, where I talk about this is where coaching comes in. Because we have to understand that with Eric Spoelstra with Miami, he was relatively a young coach and trying to deal with three personalities. Now, I'm not saying that Frank Vogel can't do it. He's been in the league a long time. But I think there's going to be a point in this season where Frank Vogel's going to have to make tough decisions. And having, like I said, having LeBron, D-Wade, and then you got to throw in Carmelo, who contrary to popular belief, even though, defensively, but
Ryan's a Carmelo guy.
I've been a Carmelo guy, but
you have to sell us. You don't have to sell us.
I won't defend his defense. It's been pretty subpar. Throw him in the post. Him and Harden, they're great post defenders. It's just that doesn't happen very much anymore.
Right? Yeah. It'll be great to see more of it. Like with Carmelo, I'm like, listen, I like Melo. I'm not anti-Melo, especially kind of like a resurrection he had in Portland. Like people thought he was washed up. I'm like, no, he's not. I'm like, he's a scorer. Like I said, you want Carmelo to play defense? Yeah, go back to Syracuse, because that's not gonna. And that's the last time I saw Carmelo play any defense. But that's one thing I'm looking for from the Lakers side, and actually from the East. Talking about the two top, I'm curious to see the Nets' life without Kyrie. I won't go into the logistics of whatever. I won't do that. But for the sake, it's not 60 minutes, so I won't do a.
Should he get the vaccine or not? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Tonight on 60 Minutes on Sports, ticking clock behind, 24-second clock behind me. But I'm curious to see life without how Steve Nash, second year ago, how do you handle not having Kyrie? Because from a basketball point of view, it's interesting because this team was built on the premise of getting essentially a big three: KD, Harden, and Kyrie. So now how do you manage with life without Kyrie? Because, however many people may feel about Kyrie's personal decisions. But I think I said I did like a video, and I basically said, like, if you look at this from a basketball perspective, where does this put the Nets? Because going in, they were one of the perennial favorite, even though Milwaukee deservedly should be the favorite. I say the Nets, listen, they're not bad when you look up and down the roster, but now without Kyrie, not having that floor general, what happens. And I think they'll figure out they're not going to be like a bottom tier team. But I'm curious to see how the top, to me, the top two teams out of the respective conferences are. Like I say with the Lakers, how they're going to figure it out, and how the Nets figure it out in the East. So that to me is curious because it's a dynamic thing for the Nets. It's like if they can somehow figure it out, and I'm pretty sure you got James Harden, who I like. I'm partial to lefties. I don't know why. I don't. It's something like even in baseball, like, oh, I like Tom Glavine. Like, yeah, Greg Maddux is great, but like it's something about seeing a left-hander, and it's like the whole Randy Johnson thing. That's a whole nother show in itself. But when you're going into the season, I'm looking at the Nets and I'm going, if they can, KD and Harden will be enough. But I feel somewhere down the point they're going to miss Kyrie. But like I say, however you may feel about him personally, you can't ignore his presence on the court. So that's the two things that will be of great curiosity to me.
Well, that's interesting because that's not necessarily glaring holes, although there could be shaped as holes. It's a pair of things about like the two Vegas favorites, right? Like in Vegas right now, I think the betting line is Nets top, Lakers second, or maybe they're third with Milwaukee, and it's right.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that you're not sold on the Vegas odds. You're looking at something deeper than that, I think. Ryan, are you looking at teams or players for your second thing? What was your second thing you're looking at?
The second thing is I want to know why Dennis Schroeder's wearing number 71. I want to get the answer. No, I'm just but I'm curious. I just threw the Celtics game on. I'm like, why is he number 71?
I'm watching it now. Sense. I'm watching it now. I'm like, wait.
Is that how many millions he lost out on?
No, he lost out on way more than that.
Yeah,
and he also did have on his birthday, he did like a hilarious Instagram post with like 10 pictures, basically clowning himself for missing out on all that money. So I'm like, I mean, dude, if you can joke about, I mean, what he missed out on like $80 million, which I can't even wrap my mind around, and he's able to laugh about it. I think Dennis Schroeder's in a good place, and he still rocks the blonde streak. So I mean, he's not really caring. But the actual thing that I'm looking for is the Hawks, and what do the Hawks do this year? Because I think everybody can agree. Regular season was all disjointed. They had the injuries. Whatever was going on between Lloyd Pierce and Trae Young led to Lloyd Pierce going out. McMillan comes in. It coincides with them getting healthy. So it's like, it's kind of hard to just be like, oh, McMillan was there and that's why they started playing really well. But by the playoffs, everybody watched it. They overexceeded, I would say, any expectations that people had, even going into Milwaukee and winning game one. And usually when that happens, everyone's like, okay, the young team's ready to take the next step. And the reality is that doesn't usually happen, when you jump ahead of schedule. And so just kind of seeing, especially with a team that really is young with only a few veterans in Bogdanovich, Capella, I think you would call a veteran too. Gallinari, even though he was moving like a mummy by the end of the year. So who knows how prominent he's going to be, but just how, again, the growth of Trae Young, the growth of Herter, growth of DeAndre Hunter coming back, Cam Reddish, theoretically should be playing this season as opposed to being injured. What does all that growth look like? And how does it set them up for playoff success? Because they're a team at this point, like they don't care about the regular season anymore. They know that they're going to be measured by how they do in the postseason. And just seeing how that goes, and also understanding that if they don't make the conference finals again this year, it doesn't necessarily mean that they got worse and there should be any panic, but just kind of seeing how that unfolds. And then also a bunch of young guys trying to get paid. I know Trae Young and Herter got paid, but Hunter and Cam are going to want to get paid soon. So they're going to want to show out. Parker knows Capella can get a little ornery when he's not getting his touches that he feels he deserves. So they got a lot of guys there that are trying to make it, and become established, big money players, and just kind of how that whole thing goes. Because I think there are certain things that can give people pause. I mean, them stacking up pound for pound versus the top two teams, Milwaukee and Brooklyn, I don't think anybody thinks that they're on that level yet.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of throw it to you guys a little bit off that then, and hear maybe your thoughts.
I actually, frankly, mentally, I'm not gonna I didn't write everything down. I guess I mentally had gone through because I didn't know how much airtime I was going to be killing tonight with people coming in and out. I went through and thought about a couple things for each team. And Atlanta, my thing was how do they measure success, right? They could be better and not get as far in the playoffs. Both things can be true with them because they could just match up with Brooklyn in the second round, right? And that could just be the way that goes, right? Last year, if they'd matched up with Brooklyn in the second round, I don't think they'd have gotten the Eastern Conference Finals.
I
right?
mean, they arguably faced a team that choked of epic proportions. And I mean, what, Philly lost 2 25-point leads. If they just close those out, they win in 5. And we're not even this discussion isn't really the same type of thing,
But every young team, like Ladarius mentioned a couple of veteran teams, which is a little different. Every young team needs to find ways to measure success every year. I got the Rockets on the corner right now. They've cut it to 15, right? But we're losing to the Timberwolves, right? But successful things would be yes, but we orchestrate this whole new offense with 4 19-year-old kids, right? Like that kind of thing. And what are those benchmarks for Atlanta? Because they can't be wins and losses. You're not sitting on well, if we don't make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, we're gonna blow this up. But you also want to see what are you getting out of John Collins? What are you getting out of Trae Young, and so on. Ladarius, what do you think about the Hawks' outlook on the year? You brought up the Nets, and what all they can and can't do with their current roster. The Hawks were right there. Trae Young gets hurt in the Eastern Conference Finals. They were fairly close to win the whole thing a year ago.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback what Ryan said, and what both of you said, it's how you measure the success. Because when you look at the Hawks, I'm a huge Trae Young guy. Because I think I've said on previous episodes, I don't have a favorite team. I gave you the whole Magic story. I won't repeat it again for legal reasons. But when I look at the Hawks, and it's talking about how do you have to look at things from a quantitative versus qualitative point of view. Because when you're a team like the Hawks, obviously they're going to make the playoffs. I hope I'm not trying to make any wild hot takes there. They're going to make the playoffs. It's a matter of if they don't get to the Eastern Conference Finals, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's a matter of you have to look at Trae. You can look at growth, and we look at Trae Young, and you look at Herter, and you look at these guys, and you're like, I like Capella. He's defensively very stout in the middle. You have Trae Young who can shoot from half court in a step type situation. Now, the biggest question is, and I think you guys alluded to, is with Nate McMillan. Is Nate McMillan the guy? Personally, I think he is. And I think whatever the whole situation happened with Lloyd Pierce, it happened. And, Nate happened to be their experienced guy, Pacers guy, Trailblazers guy. So he has the experience. So he's not a rookie at this whatsoever. And I think that will help this team. Because what happens is that when you have a young team, I'll use the Magic as an example. Even though I won't talk about the past Magic. But when you look at, new coach and the team is still relatively young. So essentially everyone's trying to figure each other out. The coach is trying to figure out what he's going to do strategically, what he's going to do. And he's a young coach. But when you look at the Hawks with a veteran coach, young team, it's going to be interesting to see what Nate McMillan does. Because I do believe he was the right guy for this job. But how moving forward, I would not be shocked if they made it back to the conference finals, because I think Trae Young's that good. I think in the NBA you have that one superstar, in a league that you're trying to build 2-3 superstars with. I think if you have one as good as Trae Young and you have a good supporting cast, like I feel the Hawks do have, because Herter, listen, low-key excellent shooter, you can get back to the conference finals. But the biggest question mark for me for the Hawks is, well, not so much as a question, but an observation. It's the qualitative versus quantitative, like I mentioned earlier. You have to look at this team from a qualitative point of view, not quantitative, because you can't measure this team in wins. Because if they win, let's just say 51 games. I don't know the over-under of their wins, but let's just say it's 51, 52 wins. That's not bad. You can't say, oh, well, last year these were you can't do that. You can't do that. But you look at the qualitative point of view, what are you going to get out of these guys? And to me, the Hawks are one of those teams that, to me, they're a top 5 team in the East. Now, are they a Brooklyn or are they the Bucks? No, like not a lot of teams are. So that's fine, but they're right there because Trae Young is right there. So that's one of the things I'm super curious about for the Hawks is that if they don't get it to the Eastern, if they don't go back to the conference finals, not the worst thing in the world. But however, if they do get back, I don't think people should be all that surprised because a healthy Trae Young changes the dynamic. So to me, that's something I'm looking out for the Hawks.
And they fit into this window with a number of teams. The last 2 years of pro basketball have been weird, right? Like there's more to it than that. But like, and whether it's the 2020 Miami Heat, the 2021 Hawks, like either Boston team. In the West, I'd say Denver, but I think Jokic really is that guy.
I mean, you could say like even the Clippers, after Kawhi got hurt and all that. And
so I guess there's just a number of teams where I'm like, who are you, right? Like, was it 2020 was weird for Miami and it worked out for them? Was it 2021 was weird and it didn't? Same thing with Boston, frankly, right? Is it the opposite with Atlanta, right? Like several teams across the league strike me as like I just flipped over once the Rockets lost to the Timberwolves, flipped over to Nuggets, Suns. Like, frankly, the Suns are in the same boat, right? Like, yes, Chris Paul is very good. Devin Booker is very good. Was last year kind of a lucky right place, right time, or is that really where they are now, right? Are they really atop the West or, fighting for atop the West? I don't know. I'm looking for those kinds of things as well across the league.
Yeah.
What are you
I
going to say?
was just going to say, because you did mention how do you measure success for the Hawks, and Ladarius has mentioned qualitative, and I do agree with that. And so, like, I was just thinking some things like who is your person that allows you not to put everything on offense on Trae's shoulders, and you're really hoping that it's one of the young guys and not Bogdanovich because he's older, and you're expecting him to phase out as you pay the young guys to grow. So you're really hoping that, whether it's Herter, I don't really think DeAndre Hunter's quite that guy, but like, what does Cam Reddish give? Or maybe it's a combination of Herter and Reddish and they can give some of that. I think that's a big key because I mean, I think we all agree that Trae Young is really, really good and is, working into that really upper echelon level. But fact of the matter is the dude is small. And if he has to carry that big load over and over and over again, I won't say odds are is that he breaks down, but as the season goes on, he's going to get more tired than one of your big wings that is also a superstar, whether it be a Kawhi Leonard, LeBron, Paul George, even Devin Booker, those kind of guys. So how can they where's that growth coming? And I think that's a big thing to look at is who helps take some of that off Trae Young's shoulders. Maybe he can play a little bit off ball more or something like that helps. And then the other one would just be defense, and for a young team comes down to, a lot to that is just defense and fine tuning those defensive rotations and everything to where they're being able to cover for each other in their sleep. They're on a string, and that allows them to weather the storm truly when the offense isn't hidden. So I guess those would be kind of the two main things for the Hawks that I would be looking for. And if they can build on those, again, even if it doesn't result in the same level of finish, I think they would be feeling really, really good going into the 2022-2023 season.
Ladarius kind of got us to talk about, again, if we're talking about things in Paris tonight, one of the two big individual stories on the year and tiptoeing around Kyrie Irving. But I do think that if we focus on the basketball side of things, I think whether it's Charles Barkley, whomever, plenty of people are talking about the non-basketball side of things. The basketball side of things with Kyrie Irving is they probably need just the output from another guard, right? Whether it's Kyrie all-star level output or whatever, right? The other big name in a very similar but very weirdly also the opposite kind of boat is Ben Simmons. More and more, Darius shook his head as soon as I said the name. More and more has come out about this guy. I went in a little bit earlier in kind of the in-between times. I have done this roller coaster where, like, watching them play, I was like, dang, he's really crapping the bed. And then after he got done playing, I was like, man, the Sixers are really crapping the bed. Like, they messed everything up. They all said the wrong thing at the wrong time. And then he told the guys to not come visit him in LA. I was like, oh, Ben Simmons is crapping the bed. like it's been up and down, up and down. And I don't know where I've landed or most lately. Getting kicked out of practice is a bad look. But the Sixers also kind of need him to play. They won by 20 tonight. But they need him to play because I'm not trading for him if the last time I saw him was the Atlanta guy. So, Ladarius, you were very demonstrative as soon as I said his name. What are your thoughts on the Ben Simmons situation right now?
Oh, was I demonstrative? I apologize. But
this is a video medium. It's not just a podcast, so they saw it.
yeah, they saw it. So I'll get the screenshot at some point, and then I'll ignore it at a press conference. Now, I'm just here because I don't want to get fined type situation. So. Well, look at the Ben Simmons thing. You know, a couple of years ago, I said that for this team to be successful, you have to get rid of either Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid because it didn't feel like they meshed. They're two, one player obviously kind of spanned out to be better than the other. But, I was on the wrong side of that, and I'll admit to that. Because with Ben Simmons, the number one, well, there's a number of problems. But the problem is that it's growth. At some point, you're supposed to be better. And if you can't decide what hand to shoot the ball with, that's a problem. It's like if you're golfing and should I be a lefty? Well, which set of clubs did you bring? Because that's going to determine which side you're going to swing the golf club. That's going to determine it. And I feel with Ben Simmons, I just think that personally, if I'm a team, I wouldn't touch him because, like you mentioned, if that's the last thing you saw, like, you're not touching it. Do I feel Ben Simmons has potential? Yes, but some of this has to be on Ben Simmons. Because at some point, we can sit and we can blame the Sixers organization for how they kind of mishandled the situation. But I'll get to that in a minute. But with Ben Simmons, at some point, it's on you, man. You're the number one overall pick. This is on you. And at some point, if we're still having questions at this point in the game, more than answers, because listen, if you can't decide how to shoot the ball, if you're not shooting the ball at a great percentage, here's the thing: if the crowd cheers for you when you make a three, for Steph Curry, that's a Wednesday night. So, but for Ben Simmons, it's a standing ovation. You think you're at the opera. You're like, everyone just like the game stops. Like, no, he should be making those. He should be getting better. And I think the whole problem with this whole Sixers thing that, listen, I think he's made it clear he doesn't want to be there. But the problem is that you can try to, if you're Doc Rivers, you're Daryl Morey, listen, like you mentioned, Parker, listen, he didn't want them to come to LA. He's like, no, I'm good. Like, keep the jet in Philly. I'm good. I think he's already distanced himself from the offseason, from this organization. Is it a point where you can salvage it? I don't know. If you had to ask me today, I think you can. Because this offseason, it feels like this. It's like there's no, and I think I said on Twitter, at some point, if you're at a point in your career where you're supposed to be getting better, like defensively, okay, he's good. He's an all-star. Listen, that's what's on his resume. If he's an all-star, cool, okay. But in terms of him being the guy, he's just not the guy. Joel Embiid has proven to be that guy. And it doesn't help when Joel Embiid basically has said, listen, what his comments after the fact today, after the whole walkout thing, I got the vibes like, listen, they're over. It's either you're here or you're not. And so I just personally feel that as much as Ben Simmons I feel he can be that guy. I just feel he just can't be that guy in Philly. He needs to go somewhere else. But the question is, what team is going to want to get him if that's the last thing we saw? The last image we saw of him is losing. We saw a bunch of Philly men boo. We saw a bunch of this. You're like, should I give up a first rounder for that? I don't know. Some
Ryan, Ryan, you were very clearly convinced it's broken. Ladarius is like, maybe it is. You're like, it is. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, first off, and Ladarius touched on it, everybody's wrong. The Sixers haven't handled it right. The players, the coaches, the front office, and Ben Simmons. Nobody has handled this situation well. Ladarius is right. Ben Simmons, you got to show some growth, man. You are basically more or less the same player as when you came into the league. That's an issue. That is an issue. Have the Sixers maybe helped him succeed in the best way? Is the roster construction the best? Is the fit the best for his skill set? Doesn't seem like it at all. I think that's pretty clear. Does it help the Sixers that he just refuses to shoot the ball outside of the paint, but we get videos during the offseason of him shooting, off the dribble threes and pull-ups and turnaround jump shots? No. So like he clearly works on these. You won't do it in the game. And he also, and I hate doing this, the armchair psychology stuff of like trying to get inside a guy's head who we don't know anything. Okay. We don't know anything about him, but he comes off as a guy who is stubborn, who, if you tell me to do this, if it's not my idea, I'm not going to do it just because you told me to do it. So back to Brett Brown. Brett Brown was saying we want him to shoot a 3 a game or something. Never happened.
Bluntly, that sounds like that's what happened at practice on Monday.
Yeah.
They said they went, and he said, "No, I'm not doing that drill."
Exactly. Like, so that's where I side in. It is more on Ben Simmons. I get that he was floated in the James Harden trades last year. I get that his teammates and the best teammate on the team or the best player on the team and the coach threw him under the bus in what I think we could all see was he was clearly going through some mental struggles of, putting the ball in the hoop. And to kick a man when he's down is not smart, even if you are super duper frustrated with him, which I think they had a right to be. Like, dude, dunk the ball. Like, try. Yeah. If you fail, try. And I know like the comparisons get floated with like him and Giannis, and it's like, oh, well, Giannis does this and Giannis does that, and Ben Simmons can do that. Except Giannis is not afraid to fail. Like that's so painstakingly obvious. We watched it in the playoffs last year where, they were this close to being ran out by an injured Brooklyn team. Giannis dug down, and then what does he do to close the season? He goes to the free throw line 19 times and makes 17 of them. I pose a question to you. Is Ben Simmons, do you believe that Ben Simmons would do that in the season this year? Ever?
No, and it comes down to my brother quoted someone, I forget who he quoted, but like, you want Ben Simmons to play like Russell Westbrook. And there are times where Russell Westbrook is shooting, you want him to play like Ben Simmons.
Yes.
But like, Russell Westbrook's going to pull up for that midi no matter what, right? Like, he shoots it at like a 30-something% clip that's not very efficient, whatever, but he's going to shoot it, right? And that at least means there's a better phrase than the Mamba mentality, but there's the Mamba thing about like, if I miss the last one, the next one's going in, right? Like whatever, right? And Giannis was like, whether it came off at times as like weirdly like he just didn't care if they were booing or didn't care if he missed or whatever. But I think the truth is that there's also confidence in that. There's also like, yeah, I missed whatever. Who cares if I missed the last one? And that seems to be lacking, to say the least. In Ben,
are we getting would you guys ever think that we're going to get the clip of Ben Simmons joking around with, I don't know, Seth Curry about airballing free throws and what could happen? I just airball another one. So what? I'm just going to keep shooting like we got from Giannis in the playoffs last year. No, like I don't know, for better or worse, maybe it helps him in his life, but in basketball, it doesn't seem like this stubbornness and I guess perceived fear of failure it's not helping him progress. And is that somebody that you want to cater a whole team around? I mean, that'd be really, really hard for me to pull the trigger on. And so when like Joel yesterday says, I'm not here to babysit, I don't care about that man anymore. I like, maybe he shouldn't be airing that, but I don't really blame the guy for speaking honestly about a guy who also told you that he doesn't want to be there either. Like, why do we have to lie about it? Like we don't,
It's a yin yang, right, Ladarius? It's like the Joel probably should not be saying that in the media, but we all get it, and we all get why that's the natural response to all the other crap. It's back and forth. I don't know what the right answer there is.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, is it professional to say what Joel said? Will we say it in a professional setting? No. But are we going to sit around and say that the man is lying? No, we're not.
or that he's even wrong for feeling that.
Right. He has a right. Everybody in that locker room is probably feeling, or more or less, what Joel Embiid is saying.
I mean, I was listening to the Right Time, Bomani Jones, and he had Mina Kimes on today, and Bomani was like, I know somebody in Philly. They're done with them. They're all the players. Like, you don't hear anybody standing up for them. You don't hear anything. They're just everybody is over it. But it's like, how do we trade the guy when Atlanta is the last thing that everybody saw? And like his trade value is at the lowest. I don't think that Daryl and Elton Brand can, like, I think it would do a disservice to the team if they just traded him for a bag of chips. Like they owe it to their team to get some value for it, because they're trying to ostensibly win a title. I mean, you got Joel Embiid on your team, like you're going for it, and who knows how much time he has left with those knees. So but it's hard. They need him to play, but nobody wants him to play, and he doesn't want to play either for them. So I don't know.
And it's interesting because you mentioned Bomani. I was listening to Amin Al-Hassan, I guess former ESPN guy, talking about it's got to be that Daryl's waiting for like Damian Lillard to be like, I want out, right? Like a year ago we saw, well, Houston's never going to trade James Harden. And then James Harden said, I'm out of here, right? And the moment that happens, it's like, well, Ben Simmons is the first guy on the market, right? And it's like, how long can Daryl really play that waiting game with whoever the next upset super? Because it might not be Dame. That was just the name that Amin was talking about. But whether it's Brandon Ingram saying the Zion guy eats too many chips, or what, right? Bradley Beal, good point, right? And like, who is the guy that is the first star that is upset, or Daryl's like, I got one, right? Because if Daryl, and can he wait that long? Because if Daryl were to trade him, I got to trade him by Friday. Well, if no superstar's upset by Friday, you're going to get some picks and a guy that's 20 years old, right? Like, that's just how that's going to go. I don't know what the answer to that is. And
I say weather the storm for a little bit. Just whether he's there, whether he's playing, or whether he's not. And obviously it's easier said than done for us not being in the crucible every day. But do your best to weather the storm. And even if you guys are, even if he's playing here and there, and you're, I don't know, 12-8 in late November, early December, somewhere around there, you're not, tanking your season, and you're giving yourself some time to work through something. Let these other players around the league, maybe the situation doesn't work out the way they want to. But I think at this point, like, you're already in the season now. So now there isn't a rush in the next couple of weeks, unless management or unless somebody from the team comes in and says like, yo guys, Elton, Daryl, he's got to be gone. You need to make this happen now.
To be fair, they won by 20. We're recording on Wednesday. They won by 20 points tonight. Like, they're not bad without him. They were fine. Ladarius, anything to wrap up on? What are you working on lately? What can you tell people about?
I'm sure. Yeah, I just want to add a point, and then I just want to add a point real quick. Is that it's reminiscent to me of the Dwight Howard situation in Orlando, where it was, to me, it was painfully obvious. That's when I was a Magic fan, and this would disillusion me from being a fan again, because when Dwight Howard made it clear, without making it clear, he didn't want to be in Orlando, and they had that. I think I talked about it on here, where he comes around and hugs, looks so cringeworthy, him hugging Stan Van Gundy, and I'm like, okay, he doesn't want to be there. So by the time his trade value went down, because at that point you could have got a couple of you could have got an all-star, but instead the Magic just said, oh, we'll try to fix it. And what happened? They got a bag of chips, not the good chips, the chips that not the good chips, the chips that you get that's stuck in the machine. You got to shake it out to get, not the good chips. And then like the best player they got was Vucevic, and he's no longer there. So in that situation, I think when you look at trade value, it's you're never gonna get equal value. But at the same time, if like Ryan alluded to, if weather it out. But if it does not, if it goes to the point where they go like, Elton, listen, we can't do this. Like, you have to do something. If it reaches that kind of code red type situation, I think everybody's hands are tied. I may not get that situation, but it just reminded me a little bit of that Dwight Howard situation now, to that extent.
Completely. I went back to try and find the Dwight Howard trade. There are so many names in this that I'd just forgotten. What's up?
Yeah,
it was a 14 because Bynum went to Philly. Iggy went to Denver. I don't even know. Ladarius mentioned Vucevic getting in there. I was like, how?
Bynum also went to Philly.
Yep.
Chris Duhon goes to the Lakers.
Duhon,
that's a name.
Denver got Aaron Aflalo and Al Harrington. And the draft pick that ends up being Dario Saric,
who ended up back in Philly.
Yeah.
Right. All of this.
Yeah, oh man. That is
it's a 2012 trade with a 2018 first round pick involved that ends up being Landry Shamet.
That is a definition of a great trade right there. Just for looking back on it purposely.
This is where this trade is. It had both Jason Richardson and Landry Shamet in it indirectly.
Parker, did you know you were going to mention Chris Duhon and Jason Richardson
today on the pod? Did you put money on that? Like, I'm going to mention these guys on this show. I wouldn't get. No.
That's crazy.
No. Yeah, this is just a crazy ass trade. Oh my god. Okay. Wild. I will say that not because 2012 was like the start of players being upset, but it's certainly like Dwight Howard being upset and getting out of Orlando was like a memorable early part of this. You could probably call LeBron and Cleveland being upset. I would call the Shaq and Kobe thing them both being upset. I don't know how far back you want to go with that. Ladarius, what are you working on these days? Where can people find you at?
Sure. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Ladarius_Brown. And, writing wise, I'm actually writing. I'm writing for the Beyond Women's Sports, so it might be a WNBA piece. I'm a huge Storm fan. My predictions that I made on this show, we will not discuss once again for legal reasons. So, but I'll be, trying. I may write. I'm working on a piece about the Seattle Storm offseason because that to me is very curious about the future of Sue Bird and how that may change the shift of that organization, and with Stewie and Jewel Lloyd and all of that nature, and then I also write wrestling pieces as well. So a lot of things in the fire. I forgot what the adage is, but we'll just say a lot of things in the fire.
For sure. And the WNBA, the Storm have to have a fairly interesting offseason because it really feels like Jewel Lloyd is the heir apparent for the Sue Bird thing as far as like a point guard goes, but also like who wants to see Sue Bird go? All good stuff. Ryan, talk about where people can find you at these days.
You can go listen to my podcast, The Coastal Connection. I think we just dropped our newest episode yesterday, talking about mostly NFL talk. We did touch on the Ben Simmons stuff, so I'm real primed in that conversation right now. This is just constantly feeding my thoughts. So yeah, check us out on The Coastal Connection on Apple, Spotify, Google. Do it with a couple of my buddies I used to coach with in Texas. And then I just wrote something on. I was getting away from all the Kyrie serious talk, and I just wrote a piece on what if he actually only played the road games, and just kind of went through everything and what I thought would have happened, because it didn't happen, but I thought it was going to be a fun experiment, even though I understand why the Nets ultimately said, yeah, we're not going to do that. I think that would have been, I mean, talk about fodder every week about, what's Kyrie going to do after a 7-game homestand and he's rusty and stuff like that. So I just wrote that on Belly Up. I am going to write a little bit something on the Sixers and what happened yesterday and Joel's comments and kind of what I touched on today. I always find it interesting when athletes are actually honest as opposed to giving the scripted responses. And I mean, we get mad at them when they don't say anything. And then once they're honest, it's like, why are you airing the dirty laundry? So it's like, damned if they do, damned if they don't. But I always enjoy personally that because I'm not in the locker room, so I don't really care about it. And then just beyond that, I mean, I'm helping out with Belly Up for the NBA writing. So now it's just going to be kind of different things that I'm seeing through the week, whether it be games, players, trying to not do so much analysis, but have some fun with it and look at a little different angles and the things that interest me on that. So yeah, check me out on Belly Up and the Coastal Connection.
For sure. Obviously, my name's Parker Ainsworth. You can find me Painter 512. Just like I say every week, my weekly audio only show F in Sports comes out mostly on Mondays, sometimes on Tuesdays. We just got a new intern named Chris Sliwa. Chris, we interviewed him on the last episode, so if you want to hear a little bit more about Chris, go back and listen to the last episode. And then this is every Wednesday night. Now that we're back in the NBA season, I'll be picking up and frankly easier to find. I mean, we talked about WNBA throughout their playoff run. But there was a lull there when it was like a kind of meh part of the WNBA season right before the Olympics, and NBA season wrapped up, and like the Olympics hadn't started yet, and that was all kind of down. And then the Olympics were on way. Oh, wait, hold on. We are adding JD Davis here. Ryan Ladarius,
last minute,
I've held y'all for a while. I'm gonna let y'all go if you need to go, but I want to hear JD talk about ring
right,
ceremony.
I'm going to cut out
Bucks.
Parker, Ladarius.
Back to back.
Nice talking to you guys. JD, we'll see if you guys go back to back.
See you, Ryan.
We're ready.
And Ladarius, like I said, everyone's cycling through. If you want to come in and out, feel free. JD, ring ceremony
What's
night.
up?
You got the shirt on. Did you celebrate? What'd you do?
So we actually not like a part of it because my parents aren't really big basketball fans, but we did have a steak dinner just kind of randomly. And then I was like, I hate to be that guy. We're having a nice dinner, but can we wrap this up? And I got to watch the ring ceremony because I was about 6:45. I'm like, I gotta see the ceremony. Yeah, this is nice and all, but like I'm already missing like pregame on TNT. Like I got to get to this. But it was fun. They were understanding. It was a lot of fun. It was great to see those guys. It was really cool to see Giannis get his ring and the crowd react and see Giannis kind of react to him because he obviously wasn't there that night. But it was a lot of fun. Good to see those guys get their rings, and they earned it, and they looked damn good night one too.
So talk to us. Did you know they were going to come out? Because sometimes the ring ceremony kind of gets to be a letdown because like there's all the emotion before the game, and then afterwards the teams burn out. What did you anticipate having that big a first night?
No, not at all. I'm not a big gambler guy, but I have some friends who are, and I'm like, hammer freaking Nets plus 1.5. Like I've seen this time and time again. Ring night. You know, last year with the Lakers, I don't think there was fans there, right? For their ring night, it was empty.
Right.
So that's a little different, but I think emotions are running high, and like it's especially different because like the Nets were there in the locker room sitting.
Did you lose him to Ladarius? Did I lose you somehow?
I cut out. Yeah, I don't know what was happening there. But basically, my thought was like because the Nets were the team that they beat in probably the realistic Eastern Conference Championship series, that they're sitting there in that locker room and they got a little chip on their shoulder knowing they're there for ring night. I thought they'd come out with a little more of an edge that they really didn't. So I was shocked to kind of see them handle them the way they did, and made me confident, man. I like and a lot of the guys that we have on our team that it's part of the depth didn't even play. was good to see guys like Nora and stuff like that get some time. So I was very happy night one. But it's night one.
Not gonna overreact. You've got big now that you're a championship teone. Really, you don't want no one overreact.
Right. We got that championship pedigree. We're
not.
Getting too.
We heard Ladarius talk earlier. I'm interested to hear what are your two big things. Again, midweek, mid range, looking at long twos. What are your two big things you're looking at this season, either as a Bucks fan or more broadly?
I guess as a Bucks fan, I'm really interested. Like personally, I'm very excited to see how like Grayson Allen fits on this team, and I do think he is a good addition. It's going to be interesting to kind of like see where we get that Tucker toughness from, and I think Grayson Allen's got a little bit of that, kind of a 3-and-D guy. So I mean, as a Bucks thing, I'm interested to see how he kind of forms in and kind of see how they react to kind of having the target on their heads that they haven't really had, because I think they've been kind of under the radar, even though I think they've been a good team. And then as a broader side, I'm really excited to see the Chicago Bulls. And I'm sure that's a popular opinion from probably a lot of people. I wasn't watching earlier. I'm sure someone might have brought that up. But I think people forgot about DeRozan out there in San Antonio, and I'm really excited to see him play basketball again. And that team is – I like that team a lot.
So as a team with championship pedigree, do you think they're a threat to win the East, or are they just a significantly better team than a year ago? Or where do you see them fitting in? Oh, did I lose him again? I might have. Ladarius, what do you think about the Bulls? Do you think they're going to be a lot better this year?
They're going to be an interesting watch. I like Billy Donovan, former Gators coach. To me, surprisingly, to me, when I look at the Bulls, I look at the construct, and I'm like, they could make the playoffs because, first of all, it's the East. So I think they can definitely make the playoffs. I'm very interested to see how everything works out, because I think, like I said, I go back. I think I talked about a lot of coaches on this so far. I look at Billy Donovan and like how everything worked out at OKC. He didn't do terrible. He didn't do terrible there. It could have been worse, but he didn't do terrible. And so I'm very curious to see the transition there, because they could be a type of team where, I'm not saying they're going to sneak and win it all type thing, but they could be a team where they could maybe shock some people, because, if like the last decade, no one's really talked about the Bulls. And I feel that it's good for the NBA that, Chicago be great. I think because Chicago, obviously we can go back because of Jordan, all of that. But I just think it's just great. Like I say, Chicago, New York, LA, when those teams do well, I feel like the league is, I'm not knocking like Milwaukee or no small market teams, but it just feels like if a team like Chicago can take that step forward this year, going into Billy Donovan, I like them. I'm like I say, they're a team that they could definitely make the playoffs, maybe 6, 7, or 8 seed, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because people really talk like, "Oh man, this is a great tip," and I'm like, they probably make the playoffs. I don't like. I think you describe them as a fun watch, and I think that's probably accurate, right? Like they're a fun watch. They'll win a couple games they shouldn't, and they'll be in the playoffs. It's a shame it doesn't look like JD's gonna be able to get back with crummy internet, because I was wondering if he was like, frankly, there's a Chicago Milwaukee fairly close together homerism there that I was wondering if I was diving into a little bit as to what those just cities aren't very far apart, right? But no, I think I'll let him go because I don't know if he's gonna be able to come back on that. I think they're a fun watch. I think DeMar DeRozan and it's a fun fit with Zach LaVine if they run it right. That takes a specific type of offense. Ladarius, I'm gonna let you go and I'll wrap up. Again, I don't know if anyone is gonna come in and out. We said we go an hour and we're past an hour, so I think we're done with people popping in and out. But thanks for stopping by, man.
Likewise, thanks for having me on. Thanks.
For sure. All right, so without JD chiming in, I think that was our first, and we're going to try and do this every now and then as far as a round table of sorts where people from Belly Up or the outside world that pop into Belly Up on occasion want to pop in and talk hoops. We did have a little bit of downtime there at the start, and that's how things go sometimes. But then all of a sudden it was like everyone's here at once, and then JD was in and out, and here we are now. Thank you all for pulling up. Oh, here's JD. JD, we're back.
Okay, I'm in better internet. I know you're logging off. To finish my thought, because I heard you say they're kind of close. So what's the thought process there? I don't think they're necessarily going to be great. I think they're going to be kind of a surprise team. And the guy, I don't know if it came through because I was talking and I didn't know when it cut out. But I want to see, and I think you touched on it. I want to see DeMar DeRozan. I think people kind of forgot about him in San Antonio. He was a big part of that Raptors kind of culture, although he wasn't there. But I think people just kind of forgot about him out in San Antonio, and that's kind of why I'm excited to see that team, to see if he's still kind of got that all-star play to him. But that was kind of the final thought there. But
yeah, well, I was going to ask how, when you say you're interested in them, are you interested in them as a Chicago, Milwaukee aren't that far apart homer? Are you interested in them in I think they're a competitive team? Or interested in them? And I think Ladarius chimed in. He thought it's interesting in that they're a fun watch. Like, they're going to be a fun team to watch.
That's kind of more it. Yeah, that's kind of more it. I mean, obviously, I got a little Midwest bias here. I do live in Ohio, even though I am a Bucks fan.
No, I know, but like if you've got family,
right, no,
connection, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
There's definitely some Midwest bias. There's definitely some Eastern Conference, because like the West is like, I wanted to go somewhere with the West. I'm like, the West is just interesting top to bottom. It's kind of hard to pick, when you're talking about your long twos or whatever. But I guess I'm just interested to kind of see how that works out. And like you said, or it might have been Ladarius, I don't know, because I kind of turned it back on to try to watch you guys for a second. But I just think it is good for basketball, and it's one of those like big brands that hasn't been there for a while. And the Bulls have been like so bad for like the majority of my life, except for the D Rose era, really. So I'm just kind of interested
D Rose era.
Yeah, exactly. So I am interested. Growing up in Ohio, obviously I love those Cavs Bulls. I mean, LeBron kind of had the Bulls number, but and I do think there's a little bit of the Milwaukee Chicago kind of rivalry that would be fun if they kind of got back to being good. So that's just a thought out of the East, but I know you're probably wrapping up. I just wanted to finish my thought there.
No, and I appreciate hearing you defend it because I didn't know what the level of intrigue was in the Bulls.
I don't think they're playoff team, 6th seed probably. Yeah.
JD, talk to us about what you're doing these days and where people can find you, aside from Ohio wearing Bucks t-shirts.
That's right. Yeah, I'm Bucks all the way around. Buckeyes and Fear the Deer. So, I'm on the Corner Booth pod, Fear at Belly Up, which is fun. Talk sports, talk a lot of football, definitely. I'm excited to kind of get them steering towards basketball. I might have to come here and get my fix for basketball sometimes. That's a lot of football. So Corner Booth, you can check us out there. And then I actually, me and a friend of mine have a YouTube and podcast show called the Two Dudes Cinematic Universe, 2DCU, and it's all movies, TV, kind of entertainment stuff, which is a sports and movies, man. I'm pretty basic. So when I'm not watching sport, Thursday through Monday is a lot of sports. Now that basketball's kicking up, it's going to be almost all the time. But I like to get some movies in during the weekday too. So that's kind of what I'm up to. So, yep, it's a lot of fun.
And that is Two Dude Cinematic Universe.
Yes, 2DCU is the easiest thing you can type in.
2DCU.
That's
and
the
then
logo,
Corner Booth Pod for Belly Up fans is a mainstay. It's been around a long time.
Yes.
They do a great job over there. It's a good team. I'm happy to hear a part of that, man. And then
we just did our basketball preview too. So
just did your basketball preview. Perfect. You're probably the basketball head over there. It's a lot of football talk with.
It is Kevin a lot of football. I had to put Jared in his place about his not his Trailblazers. Sorry, his Timberwolves. He's delusional. He thinks they're going to be. I'm like, dude, you're lucky if you make the playoffs, and I don't think they do, but that's a different story. He's delusional. So,
all right, man. I'll let you get out of here. Take care. Go
Thanks.
Bucks.
Yep.
Congrats on the ring.
Go Bucks. Back to back, baby. Let's go.
Take care. All right. On that note, I probably need to hop out before people continue to hop in. Again, my name is Parker Ainsworth. You can find me at Painsworth512 on Twitter and Instagram. My audio-only show I was talking about earlier, it comes out every Monday, sometimes Tuesday. We got a new intern named Chris Lewa. It's called F in Sports. It's teachers and education type people, related people, talking about sports, grading theses, giving multiple choice questions, and so on. And as always, Midweek Mid-Range will be Wednesday nights at 9, sometimes 9:30 Eastern time, talking about whatever's going on in basketball. Sometimes we'll bump it back to 9:30 based on when the games are at that time. It'll be a weekly show for all Belly Up basketball all the time. And we'll be making sure we tie in some people from the outer Belly Up, outside of Belly Up, outer edges of the Belly Up universe. So be sure to tune in every Wednesday night. And as always, find us on YouTube if you can't pull up live. Thank you for pulling up tonight. Take care, everybody. Bye.